town. Nnewi in Anambra State. I went to secondary school in the youngest government college then. And then from there, I went to the University of Ibadan, and then was chased back because of the civil crisis in 1966, and graduated at University of Nigeria and was a Commonwealth scholar, and studied at Imperial College, where I got my PhD and DSc. And then started teaching at the University of Nigeria, moved on when Professor Kenneth Dike invited me, and I was professor and dean of his faculty, ended up at postgraduate school, and was member of Senate and a member of Governing Council. So, and left to contest governorship of Anambra State after being commissioner for 4 different governors, Meko Merwa, Bob Akonobi, Abatu Dieze, and Joa Bulu. And I was actually pioneer commissioner for health for the new Anambra State. So when I contested for governorship and won, and it was reversed 3 weeks to the election, I said I didn't want to change the party. And so I became political advisor to the president, and from there to Minister of Health for the country. And now I am a member of Board of Trustees of the PDP.
We thank you very much, Prof, for this brief introduction. Now, my first question is this. You were there in the beginning in 1960. And I also understand you actually took part in the Nigerian Civil War. Are you minded to tell our audience? Are you minded to tell our audience in what capacity what's your experience during the Nigerian Civil War in the 1960s?
I said 1960. I was a senior boy in Government College at Igbo, and I was there when the Nigerian flag was hoisted up and the Union Jack. So I moved from God Save Our Queen to Nigeria. We hailed it. And then we went to University of Ibadan. As soon as the crisis came, I was one of those very active in the Students' Union of Biafra then, when we seceded. And any young man like me, if you didn't join the army, you were not really a young man. So I joined the army quite early, and we were the people defending from St. Philip's to get it to the corridor. And we were there. We didn't even know the war had ended because we were not routed in the place. We just found that the war had ended and packed our things and went. So I got wounded. I've been carrying 1.5 lungs since 1969, the Operation Do or Die. So any young man who was a young man, no 20-something young man like me, an undergraduate, did not join the army. It was unheard of. So Biafra was a collective project. Anybody who's giving this stupid narrative that Ojukwu came and deceived people who were not ready, and they went and embarked on a suicide mission. I mean, it's stupid. If Ojukwu did not secede and declare Biafra, we would have gotten rid of him and declared Biafra. We reached a stage, I don't know if the others will understand, but it's best said in Igbo. The stage Biafra, Eastern Nigeria was in 1967 is Ejindu Emegene. If we didn't fight Ejindu Emegene, What are you doing with life when somebody comes and violates your wife in your presence and kills your father in your presence, and you are still trying to be alive? Alive for what? You fight the person. Whether you have aeroplanes, you don't have aeroplanes, you have machine guns, you don't have, you fight the person. And that was what we did. And none of us ever regrets that we fought. And we are gratified that all those who fought us are saying that if they were in the position where Ojukwu found himself in 1967, that they would have done exactly the same thing as they did. And that's why you find that no matter what anybody says about Ojukwu, none of them is going to get the burial Ojukwu got. None of them is going to get the reception Ojukwu got when he was granted pardon and he came back. The entire Igbo people emptied themselves when he came back as Onyeije no. And the entire Igbo, and incidentally, I was the secretary of the organizing committee of his burial, were there and mourned him fully. So it was a collective effort. So if you want to know, of course, I wasn't rare in the rear. I was in the trenches. I was in the trenches. In actual fact, we could have been killed on about January 16 when the war had actually ended. Because we didn't know the war had ended.
Okay, Prof, we thank you for this a little narration you have just given. I also understand that even after the Civil War and when Ojukwu went to exile, and then he came back from exile, you eventually grew close to him. You eventually became very close and became friends to the Ikemba.
I didn't grow close to him. We have a blood relationship as far back as 1959 in secondary school. I was spending holiday in his father's house at Alexander Avenue by Captain Hotspot. So we are I'm from Nwosu, he's from Nwosu, we are in-laws, we are tied in more ways than one. And not only that, we liked ourselves very much. So it wasn't when the war ended. I knew him before the war ended. Before the war started, I knew him during the war. I knew him after the war. And we were close till the end. And when he died, the organization of the book that was giving him problem, his account and all that, I've already said it, he handed the thing over to me. And we have just framed the book. And we will get the book out. The book will be out in the next 1 or 2 years. The book, there's so much to investigate in the book. But as for the questions to be asked, they've been framed. The investigations to be made, they've been made. The persons to be contacted, who were the commanders, have been contacted. The people who have never given their own accounts, who were central to the coup, have been contacted. And the kind of questions that we are asking is, was it really an Igbo coup? Was Ironsi involved? How many people have seen the handover note or have read Dr. Nwaforizu's blow-by-blow account of how power was given to Ironsi? How many people have seen it? Nwaforizu has a blow-by-blow account in his own writing, of how they called him. Ironsi came with Galadima and Sokoto to see him. And the first thing he did, he eventually, when he went to appoint a prime minister, As soon as he left, he called his Attorney General, Dr. Taslim Olawale Elias. And the account of the handover was drafted by Dr. Taslim Olawale Elias. Because one for reason said, what is his, asked Dr. Elias, his Attorney General, what his constitutional position was. And I have, incidentally, one for reason is my uncle. So I have the photograph, not Googled, photograph, the actual photograph of where he was sworn in by Adetokunbo Ademola, where he had the service chiefs beside him as a literate. So he was advised, you are de facto de jure, he handed over to you, you have been sworn in. So, but all these will come in the book, so that no judgments, presenting the facts. Was it really an Igbo coup? And when people see that that coup was conceptualized by no other than Efajuna, it was not Nwosu that conceptualized the coup. It was Efajuna, which is Padiman, his friend Ademoiga. They at the University of Ibadan, they were graduates. It was when they started looking for collaborators that they got, of course, Chris Anoforo, who went to St. John's, Kaduna, and Chris Anoforo got Nwosu, his friend at St. John's, Kaduna. And then if you want to know, Chukwumerije was actually involved, but he didn't finally join the army after being selected to join the army. He went for the interview same day with Ademoiga, but people don't read. Ademoiga put it clearly in his book, Why We Struck. It's not any information that we had to manufacture. So you look at the other person, Humphrey Chukwuka, you now have the 5 majors. Bambuye, who wrote the Nigeria's 5 majors, was not a major. He was not a captain. He was a captain. He only assisted. He only assisted Team Nwosu and Team Onwatuegwu. But if you look at the main actions in the north, then it was Nwosu and Team Onwatuegwu. So all these we are working on, they will come out. The July 29 will come out. Why May 29 program accord will come out, and all that. And facts or answered questions for and against. It's going to be a voluminous book. I was fortunate when Awolowo came to see Ojukwu on if the East secedes, the West will secede. I was outside as director of strategy and mobilization for Biafra Students Union with the president of Students Union, the late Professor Emeka Emejere, who were in the anteroom. They were in. Unfortunately for them, I have a verbatim report of the 2-day meeting on the 6th and 7th, which were Saturday and Sunday. Awolowo came in with somebody who was teaching at the University of Nigeria and was well known to you, Professor J.I.G. Onya and Jonathan Maria. So we have accounts. That's why everybody has been suppressing that we don't want to have the history. And that was why I had to travel to Rhode Island. Of course, it wasn't my first. And I'm one of the few that have the autographed copies from Chinua Achebe himself of There Was a Country. And that's why I rose in his defense when he was attacked. He gave me the copies, the autographed copies to give to the other people. So it is a burden we carry. Ojukwu carried the burden to the grave. Many of us, it's now left to us. And the issue is that we are trying to get it now. We've got it. That verbatim report of the Ojukwu Awolowo meeting, we have it. We will publish it in full. Nobody has ever published the Fajona manuscript. You see excerpts in Obasanjo's book, Nzogo. Let people go and read that book again. And then one book that people ignore, but an excellent book called In Biafra, Africa Guide. It has also excerpts from that book called Indictment. So let me not go and dwell on the book. So you now know that we will, but the most important chapter for us is being titled A for Auschwitz, B for Biafra. When is genocide? Genocide. You know, and you can see Asaba is still in tears. Let me not mention the others. So it is all right for people to say, let sleeping dogs lie. The prophet said this, you want to keep quiet, it will reopen old wounds. It's easy for somebody who killed my uncle, who was paying my school fees, to forget and say, I don't want to hear. It's not that easy for me, whose education was truncated because my uncle was killed, his house appropriated, his property appropriated. It's not easy to tell me, don't talk about it. I mean, where I come from, you can't slap a child and ask that child not to cry. The burden of what we know is too much on us. We are not bitter. We are not unforgiving. But we don't want to forget the burden of why a federal government scholar like me transferred from University of Ibadan in 1966 to University of Nigeria and waited 3 years while my mates graduated in 1968. I had to graduate. I wasn't even allowed to graduate in 1970. I graduated in 1971. So it's not easy for me not to expel bad breath. So it's bad breath. We're only trying to expel bad breath, but I've dwelled too much on it so far. When the book comes out, people will judge it. But the book is not by me only. The book is by me. The three people asked to produce the book by Ojukwu were Nwosu, Clement Ebri, and Professor S.J. Kuku.
Prof, thank you very much. This, for me personally, what you have just said evokes some feelings. A lot of Nigerians are so ignorant of our past. And so we would like to hear more on what happened when we started before we move to our topic of the day, because it will help us to situate things in their proper perspective. So there is something you mentioned that touched me, that you were actually staying at the home of Sir Louis Odumegwu Ojukwu. So I will first of all ask that question before I move on to some other issues I would like clarified. What type of man is this? To us, he is a legend. So what type of man is this Sir Louis Odumegwu Ojukwu? Prof, I don't know whether you had my question, sir.
No, I didn't. You were breaking.
Okay, my question is, before we move on to some of very, very vital issues you have just raised, permit me to first ask, because you said you regularly stayed in the home of Emeka Ojukwu's father. So what type of man is Sir Louis Odumegwu Ojukwu? Because he has a lot of legends around him. So if you can now hear from you who knew him personally, what type of man was he?
Incredible man. Incredible man. Of course, he had an intimidating presence. He was a huge man. He was not a short man at all. He was tall, huge, and he was wealthy beyond description. I know that in the garage we had LA1, which was the Rolls Royce. We had the LC1, which was the Armstrong Sidley limousine. We had LF1, which was the Cadillac limousine. And they had, I can't name, he was the largest shareholder, almost companies you could think of. He divested from Ojukwu Transport, which was at Yaba, behind which you had West African pilots. And we were little boys playing and coming around, but he was wealthy beyond description. And he believed in education. Most people who could study in England, he sent to England. And Emeka was not spoiled at all. Emeka spent a lot of time also in the Nwosu family. Emeka spent a lot of time because the father's elder sister was my grandfather's one of his wives. So he was a great man. There's no way to describe him. In fact, when he wanted LM1 for the 600 Pullman Mercedes when it arrived, we had to go. We small boys from secondary school chatting. He had to send a case of champagne to Dutola, who already had the LM1. And Dutola said, completely gave him the number, LM1. And if you need to see the house, it was a combination of the large, the compound, 17 Alexander, is in acreage, it's not in square meters. And then he had to combine it with 13 Hawksworth. So that's why Jam took it over. And he had not less than 11 houses in Ojukwu. And you can see the Nnewi building at Apapa. And what he was, and on that, he was a disciplinarian, he was humane. If you did well in school, he appreciated you, he loved education. And he was very nice to all who knew him. But Emeka, his son, was also a tough guy. He grew up in my family. He wasn't a spoiled child at all. So if you thought he was a pushover and wanted to box him or anything, you got worsted.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, another thing you raised, even though you touched on it a little bit, we will like a little bit clarification. The coup of 1966, you have just said it was conceptualized by Ifajuna. But the general notion is that this is an Igbo coup. If you will tell us how many people are actually the ideas behind that coup, how many people and what are their ethnic nationalities?
To say that it's an Igbo coup is a nonsensical narrative. The Igbos have not been very liked. in Nigeria. They didn't do the coup before the common view that the Igbos like to dominate. They come into anything, they take over. When did the Igbos start going to school? Wasn't it as a kid? But when they went to school, like J.P. Clark wrote in his book, they crawled out like ants from the forest, excellent poet, and they took over education. You had the communities sending their teachers overseas to study law. And some stupid ones they sent to study law studied English. And when they came back, they weren't appreciated. I'm saying this sarcastically, just pointing out to, if you remember, no longer at ease. Biokonkwo, the brilliant boy, the community, Omofia, contributed, went and studied English. When they sent him to study law, so that it would be useful for the community in land cases against other communities. The story Achebe was telling there is that communities started competition. How many of your children have you sent on community fund? How many secondary schools did you build as community secondary school? How many hospitals have you built as community? I know that in Nnewi, the post office was largely Ojukwu influence, but Nnewi contributed. The Nnamdi Azikiwe Teaching Hospital now was Mboli General Hospital built by Nnewi people. Even the teaching hospital, Nnamdi Azikiwe, when it was state government and they had no money, Nnewi people contributed and built. And it became a competition. If you had money, I was fortunate, I was commissioner for health. I know that I gave drawing plan to Ibetu and he built one. I gave drawing plan to Chikasa, he built one. I gave drawing plan to Liskata, he built one. So Igbo people took interest in community. And when they went, they built secondary school in Kano. They built secondary schools where they live. You see, sometimes success, if it generates resentment, like Kissinger in his note wrote, quickly found, that the Igbos are like Jews of West Africa. They are resented. That resentment was voiced by the leadership in the North. It was clear. But you had law and order. You couldn't just kill people. So the Igbo coup, that narrative is a silly narrative to give an excuse for the mass murder and the expropriation of Igbo properties and looting. I give an analogy. There were two Igbo communities struggling, jealous of each other. The teacher they sent studied law and succeeded, was called to the English bar. The other one didn't succeed, didn't even come back. So the community was jealous of the community that had that, the lawyer. And when the lawyer was going to Onitsha, and passed in his hotel record, and the antagonistic community came and collided with the car with his bicycle and fell down unconscious. The town people had an excuse. They came out that this lawyer had killed their brother, murdered him, beat him to death, burnt his car. Unfortunately for them, their brother recovered from his consciousness. When he got up, they knew they faced death. So they had to go and kill their brother to have the excuse for killing the lawyer. Doesn't quite go like that, but there had to be an excuse for attacking and dealing with the Igbos who were setting up shop everywhere, buying land and building houses. That's why it's an Igbo coup. Otherwise, Odumegwu wrote his book, Why We Struck. He was a core member of the 5 majors. Why don't people read it? That's one of the first books. Actually, the first book to come out from the 5 majors. Ben Willier's book, 5 majors, was about 5 majors. He wasn't a major. One of the 5 majors was Odumegwu. And he was in Biafra all through. Ifeanyi wrote his own, the indictment. People have seen it. And it was not about Igbo coup. And what were the Igbos trying to do a coup for? Against Azikiwe, their president of Senate Nwosu, who became acting president, chief of army Aguiyi, the first Nigerian to be made permanent secretary, FC Nwokedi. What were they doing coup for? Against, to occupy what? The first vice chancellor, the first principal of the college, Kenneth Dike. First vice chancellor, Kenneth Dike. Vice chancellor, University of Lagos, Eni Joko. Why did the Igbo need to do a coup? To do what? To dominate who? You see them, revolution, revolution, revolution. Nwosu's speech on behalf of the Supreme Council of the Revolution. They were fed up with the direction the country was going. They were fed up with the corruption that had started. Yes. That is at least all the evidence that we had by those who conceptualized and those who actually carried out the coup. But why didn't you call Oka coup? Gideon Oka, Major Oka. Why isn't it called the TV coup? Why? Why are the others not called Hausa Fulani coup? Why? Or did you hear that there was any Igbo involved in these other coups? Or Yorubas? Do coups follow national, federal character? Coups are done by people who they trust. I've told you Anoforo, St. John's, Kaduna. I think there's even, but not at the major level. Nwosu, St. John's, Kaduna. Ifeanyi DMGS on nature. And University of Ibadan, where he met Odumegwu. Humphrey Chukwuka, DMGS on nature. So you can now see how, when you are ready, you call your party man or you are this, and that's how coups are done. So if you had an Igbo inviting another Igbo, how could he trust? Do you know how many people they contacted of other ethnic groups who betrayed them, and so they shifted the dates? They approached some members of other ethnic groups, and those people betrayed them, and they had to shift. So when the full story is told, then you will see. Can you excuse me a moment?
Right, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you excuse me a moment?
Yes.
Can you excuse me a moment?
Yes, we could, sir. Yes, we could. Yes. Prof, you are welcome. You were speaking about the. You are answering the question
Sorry.
whether this.
I'm here.
Yes, you are telling us whether it's an Igbo queue or not. Do you want to continue with that train of thoughts, or do you want us to shift to the next question?
I want to. Every fact we have is that it was not an Igbo coup, and we shall put the facts and let people judge, because it was investigated. It was investigated by the commissioner in charge of special branch of the police, who later became Inspector General of Police for Nigeria, MD Yusuf. And the report was submitted to Gawan as Chief of Army Staff. And Gawan should have submitted it to the Ironsi Supreme Council then, and the matter should have been settled. It was not, it had been investigated. MD Yusuf from Katsina, former Inspector General of.
Sorry, was the result of that investigation, was that made public?
I don't know, but I'm saying it was investigated, it was given to Gawan, but it is now public through the underground media. It's now public through the underground media. We have a copy. We have a copy. And most people have copies of it. And you had people who were involved, who were later absolved, both Igbos, Hausas, everybody.
Okay.
So
okay, we thank you very much. Sorry for this brief interruption. Now, the question I have at this point is this. I have read Shehu Shagari's book, Beckoned to Serve. Shehu Shagari was a minister in the First Republic and was also there when the coup happened. Now, Shehu Shagari was of the view that he met with the Senate president then, Nwosu, who tried to, because they had a relationship, Nwosu was telling him, what has happened is unfortunate. We hope that you will let your people know that we, the Igbo elites, have no hand in this coup. And Shehu Shagari gave the indication that he understood. Now, I also watched an interview by The Boy is Good, Mbazulika Amechi. Very good. Mbazulika Amechi was of the view that if Ojukwu had liaised with them, that they could have liaised with their counterparts in the North to look for a diplomatic solution to the impasse the Nigerians saw themselves at that point. Now, because there is this relationship between the politicians, did Ojukwu make a mistake in not involving the elite politicians from the East to liaise with the elite politicians in the North to find a diplomatic solution to the impasse Nigeria found themselves in, rather than going to war? What do you think, sir?
In my view, the war was unavoidable. The war was unavoidable. The war could not have been avoided. And let me tell you why. When Igbos were killed in May 29, remember that killing was not Igbo soldiers versus Igbo soldiers. It was civilians running their own shops that were killed in May 29. It was said to have been because of the decree declaring unity by Ironsi, which incidentally the same thing we're running. But Peter Nahoro's book, Then Spoke the Thunder, gave a completely different reason. And Peter Nahoro's book is a fact book. And Peter Nahoro is a sham, it's not Igbo. and his same parents with Tony and Nahuru. If you read it, you will find that Ironsi invited him and told him that he had now made up his mind he would release Awolowo and Co. on August the 2nd. Clearly written in his book. And he had that. He told him, he told him they had a mole in the Supreme Council. And Kurubo and Fajui told him who the moles were in that council. And by the way, Awolowo was released on that August 2nd. And remember that the people who did the coup, who were detained, one of their ultimate agenda was free Awolowo from Calabar prison and fly him in and set up a diarchy, whether he desired it or not. The person whose assignment it was to do that is still alive. He was a colonel in Biafra. So when you see Peter Pan, you see that there is an alternative view to May 29 massacres, which the Observer was the first of London to call pogrom. Pogrom is a horrible word in any nation, and that is why they want us to keep quiet. Those who committed pogrom, nobody who commits pogrom is ever proud of committing pogrom. And therefore, that's what happened. We now have an alternative view. The popular view is that it was Unity Decree number 34 of Ironsi that did it. And the purveyors of this nonsense will tell you that it was Ben Wabeze that wrote it for his brother. Decree 34. That's what happened. But we have details of how it was planned. The Oyibo people who were involved, Mr. Richardson, Major Boyle of the Ahmadu Bello Institute for Administration, we have all the details because the people ran back and told their stories and they were deposed. So the issue is we now have story one, but most people don't have story two, even if it is at their beck and call, the book by Peter Pan. Why don't they read the book by Peter Pan? Why tell only one side of the story and not tell the other? And we have a book published, Pogrom. People coming back, people whose tongues were slashed, people whose eyes were gouged out. We have a book published, Pogrom, showing that they were real people and what happened. So the issue is that those who committed pogrom or who commit pogrom and genocide in a country are not proud of it. Those who keep silent, which is the rest of the Nigerians, almost saying to the Igbo, serves your right, cannot be proud of it now and cannot raise their hands and say, we are principled people, we speak for justice. How can they? There's nothing as bad as pogrom and genocide in any, is worse human, even worse than slavery. Somebody was decapitated completely, 6'4", huge man, decapitated, and the body without the head sent to Ojukwu as a present. That's what they don't want us to show the picture. Again, they don't want to. But we, especially people like me, who are bloody Nigerians, we are. Our children are married from all ethnic groups. I have 10 grandchildren. Only 5 are Igbo. Only 5 are Igbo. The others are half Igbo, half Yoruba, half Igbo, half Benin, half Igbo. So I can tell you what we want to do is to remove it and get what Oputa panel tried to achieve. These things were wrong. Let us accept that these things were wrong before you begin to say never again. What is the never again? Never again shall somebody wake up one morning and start to slice the belly of a pregnant woman, of a fellow citizen, and kill the fetus. That is never again, but it has to be said first, so that the person who did it will now feel a pinch that it was bad and appreciate the position of the person he did it to. So that is we have all that. It is not malice. Mandela came out. They did their Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa. It worked. In Biafra, when they did Truth and Reconciliation, one of the majors of the coup, who was actually responsible for the death of one of the senior officers from the North. The wife was in Truth and Reconciliation Committee. Chairman Oputa, we call it Oputa panel here. Secretary, Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka, from Zangon Kataf, Southern Kaduna, that is now experiencing this. That major told the wife of the senior Samson, I am sorry. And there was 2 of them. The woman said, it's okay. And there was that. When they are Sabanda, so ordered it, and if he were in a position, he would bravado. It's not what you build the nations. The America we put often says that all men are created equal. Isn't it so? And have a set of ideas. Around which that's why that someday we will live in the world. Nigeria is not a federation. We have a constitution that says we the people. It's a lie again. And all we're trying to say is, if you want to build a country, don't build a country where there is dominance, where one nation within the nation presumes that is superior to the others. It will not happen.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think your statement now sets the tone for our team today. Now, we are now approaching 2023. There is this argument that in view of the background you have given us, that it is the turn of the Igbos to produce the next president of the country. Then there is also a large section of the population of the Igbos, again, who are saying, well, in as much as we would like to produce the next president, but that will not solve our problem. Why don't we, first of all, restructure the country, take care of this constitution that you say that this constitution is a lie because it is not properly produced. Let there be a sovereign national conference or by whatever name called to produce a new constitution that will produce a different structure for the country, and then let's take it from there. So in your mind now, in harmony with our team for today, what really should the Igbos who have experienced the history of just giving us the background to, what should they be asking for? Would they be asking for to say it is our turn to produce the next president? Or would they be saying, no, let us restructure the country first to give a fair sense of balance to each section of the country?
Thank you. To me, the two should not be put in one basket at all. They have no relationship. Restructuring is a settled matter. Restructuring was settled in 1994-95. Restructuring was settled at Aburi. And I can tell you that if Aburi hadn't been violated, there would have been no war, in spite of the pogrom and the mass murder of people. There would have been no war. Aburi will stand. If there's no war, if the permanent secretary then thought that they knew better, that thought so restructuring is a member of the National Conference in 2014. And the head of the Igbo Secretariat that serviced the Abacha conference in 1994-95. Abacha conference with a lawyer, but when you promise a there is nothing nation can have two sovereignties. So sovereign national conference is not much authorized to produce a constitution. And that constitution was fully produced and signed and delivered by Justice Caribbean White, who was the chairman of the conference. It was at that conference that the Igbo sent their first eleven. The leader of the conference was the Ueme, Dr. Alex Ueme. And you know, the chairman of the Igbo delegates was General Odumegwu Ojukwu, and his deputy was some.
I think, Prof, I think we're having a problems with your network now.
But
hello, Prof. Hello, Prof.
When everybody left, it is an opportunity to form. That Igbo Secretariat, Chipenodi was there, the professor of political science. And when Ekwueme got up to move rotate, he got up, they were not going to speak in.
Hello, Prof.
Hi.
Guests, please, let's have patience. Let's allow Prof to sort out network issues, because I think he's making some valiant points now, which we wouldn't like to miss. Right, Prof, we are so sorry. We lost most of the things you said about the 1995 conference. And I think it will be unfair.
Okay, are you here?
Yes, we are hearing you now.
Okay, I'll get back to it. Before 1995 conference, all this cacophony you hear about Igbos wanting to be president, not wanting to be president, not wanting. Let no Igbo man's heart be worried and troubled at all. That's how the Igbos are. There will be those hustling, thinking this is a chance either to make money or to make name. But in 1994-95, there was a 2-day conference called Igbo, for those who remember, where the Igbos had to speak with one voice. I was the chairman of organizing committee of Igbo. Are you hearing?
Yes, we are hearing you now.
Okay. I was chairman of organizing committee of Igbo. It was at that the keynote speaker, Ojukwu, gave his keynote, gave the chairman's remarks, but keynote speaker Lex Ekwueme came there and postulated rotational presidency and 6 geopolitical zones. Brilliant paper. Like an architect and a lawyer, the doctorate degree holder. He had everything well done, and you could see 6 geopolitical zones. Those trying to make it 8, 10, they don't understand. 3 in the north, 3 in the south, parity. 3 to the major ethnic groups, 3 to the minorities. Well thought out. I remember clearly because I was there, Igbo Secretariat. Alex Ekwueme got up to move the motion on rotational presidency. Pandemonium broke, as usual, from the 3 northern zones. And provided Ojukwu with what he looks for. So he marched with his hand behind his back robustly and stood by Ekwueme and said, "You must speak. This is our country. You must speak." The conference. And every Igbo delegate lined up behind Ekwueme. And when they found that the conference was about to break into two, north and south, they had to. The draft constitution, which by the Abacha had there and the south, clear. I have it, it is green by government press. The draft signed by Karibi White. Another problem that rose was derivation. And the South-South was shocked that the